It's slightly more complicated than that because some of them have got co-leadership candidates as well, but we'll get into that during the course of the programme. But let me introduce you to the 5 participants over the next hour and a quarter. Amelia Womack is Deputy Leader of the Green Party, whose co-candidate is Tamsin Omond. Shara Ali is here with me in the studio as well, Green Party spokesperson for policing and domestic safety, who is also a former Deputy Leader. Ashley Gunstock, to my right, is an actor, political activist, school teacher and football coach, and also, I think, Ashley, you stood for the leadership back in, what was it, 2008 against Caroline Lucas. Yeah. Adrian Ramsey joins us remotely. He is an environmental charity chief executive and former deputy leader of the Green Party. His co-candidate is Carla Denyer. He's in Norwich. I remember him from Norwich politics going back to the 1990s. He was just a child then. Too, and Martin Hemingway is secretary of the regional Green Party Yorkshire and the Humber, and his co-candidate is Tina Rothery. The format is very simple, similar to Cross Question, where you get the opportunity to question the candidates. The number to call, if you'd like to do so, 0345 6060 973. And of course, if you're listening, you can watch us as well on Global Player, on the LBC YouTube, Facebook or Twitter feeds. So let's get cracking with our first question. It's from Simon in Southampton. Simon, go ahead. Hi.
Good evening. Hello. Right. Okay. Whilst I acknowledge that you have your own policies and your own ideas and, things to do, we are very polarised in this country where you are either left or you are right. We need to get rid of the Tories. We need them gone. Would you form an alliance or a pact with Labour and the other left parties to enable that to happen? And if you did would you then approach Keir Starmer about a universal basic income?
Oh, you want 2 for the price of 1 there, don't you, Simon?
Of course.
Well, this is quite an interesting one because this idea of a so-called progressive alliance has been around for some time, where the parties of the left would come together with the main aim of ousting the Conservatives. Adrian Ramsey, let's come to you first on that. Does that idea appeal to you?
Well, there is something appealing about that idea because this government is taking us in horrendous directions, not only failing to take the action we need on the climate emergency, but presiding over society that's getting more and more unequal all the time. We've seen horrendous cuts to universal credit and public services deteriorating. So clearly we need a change. And in principle, I support the progressive parties in this country coming together. And Carla and I would issue a challenge to Keir Starmer to get round the table and bring together that progressive majority. This does, though, need Labour round the table and talking to the other progressive parties to work. And it needs Labour to get beyond its tribal traditions in order for this to be effective. And if Labour doesn't, we would be very clear that there's no one-way gifts from the Green Party. We would want to be standing in every seat and focusing our resources on a distinctive Green message to win the next Green seats in Parliament, which we can do with a clear targeting strategy. So, yes, if Labour, and for that matter, the Liberal Democrats, Plaid Cymru and others, get round the table, progressive alliance, I would love to see it happen. But if they're not coming round the table, if Labour are not playing ball, we will not be making unilateral gifts. That's the approach Carla and I would take.
Martin Hemingway.
Yeah, obviously my approach is very similar to the others, but we have to recognise that we are not the barrier. We're willing to work with other parties. It's getting the other parties in a position to work with us. We have run 1 or 2 such alliances here in the Yorkshire region, in that we've had Labour stand aside for us unofficially in elections, and we've elected councillors. We've had the Lib Dems do the same. But Labour can only do it, and the Lib Dems can only do it by keeping it secret from their own regional parties, by having a candidate withdraw late on, or by not putting in the paperwork, or by saying they haven't got a candidate. Because in the Labour Party, the Constitution requires them to stand everywhere. And the Lib Dems, at least in our region, pursue a policy of standing everywhere. So yes, we're very open to it. We'd want to talk to other parties about it. It is a possible way forward, but it's the willingness of the other parties to enter into it. And obviously one of the things we do want, because it's party policy, is UBI, a basic income, the citizens' income that we've been championing for decades within the Green Party. And yes, we would be wanting to bring that in as one of the fruits, along with PR, of a progressive alliance government.
Ashley Gunstock, isn't it cheating the electorate, though, to stand down in some seats because a lot of people will want to vote for their first preference party?
Well, that may be so, but it has actually been the foundation of my campaign that we should form progressive alliances. First of all, to get rid of this Tory government, and as your caller suggested, there's other things on the table, universal basic income, but I would say there's a hat trick to be had in that we could also bargain with PR, because we need to get this country fully democratic, and we can't do that with the political system that we've got at the moment. So progressive alliances are the way forward, and it has happened so that we almost got rid of Iain Duncan Smith in a constituency where my local party is by standing down. Unfortunately, the Labour candidate lost by 1,000 votes, but would have won had the Lib Dems stood down. And the reverse happened in Esher, where we would have got rid of Dominic Raab if the Labour Party had stood down for the Liberal Democrats. So we've really got to get round the table and talk about this, because it is a serious issue. Because if we come out the next election with the Tories in government, we stand no chance of reaching the Independent Panel on Climate Change's target of reducing emissions by 50%.
You see, Amelia, listening to Martin there, a lot of people will say, well, that's trying to fiddle the system. And there could be a backlash against this sort of alliance, couldn't there?
Well, I was actually going to say it's interesting compared to 2015, for example, when the Greens didn't enter into a progressive alliance. The 1 year in the last 3 general elections where we haven't. And we had a big and bold message. And what happened was grassroots organisations took the broken political system into their own hands. And we saw people in different communities using Vote Swap to take action at a community and individual level to try and readjust the problems with a broken political system. And I think what's important at the moment is, obviously, when it comes to UBI, as co-leaders, we will be making sure that we're challenging Labour on UBI and making sure, working to get it adopted, whatever happens. But I think if we look at the Labour Party right now, they are failing. They are failing on the biggest challenges of our era, whether that's on the climate and ecological emergency, or whether that's not standing forward for a big vision of what needs to happen next economically in terms of an austerity budget that is inevitably going to come through, and I don't think they've got the teeth to work against it. And I think that what we need to be doing now is putting forward a strong green voice, tackling those challenges, making sure we're getting as big a vote as possible. And what I would say is, yes, those conversations can happen. Yes, they've happened before, and I'd really like to see Sian and Jonathan continue that work that they did on progressive alliances, working on those conversations. But you know what I want is to inspire as many people as possible to vote Green, because we see the other parties.
Yeah, but if you have a progressive alliance, you're going to have to stand down in some seats, and there'll be people in those seats who then won't have the opportunity to vote Green.
So I think this is why I think the rise of those grassroots movements in 2015 was so important, because it was about empowering people to challenge a broken system rather than behind closed doors. And, you know, I found that really inspiring. And I know many people that I've spoken to found that really inspiring, because it was about people taking their own power back. And yeah, if Sian and Jonathan would talk to the other political parties, build on the relationships they've already had. But we know that Labour, they didn't just close the door on it, the door on us, they slammed the door in our face, to be frank. So I'm not going to hang all my options on that, because we've got arguments that need winning, an anti-austerity argument, an argument for a Green New Deal, and an argument that will tackle the climate and ecological emergency.
Shara, your 4 colleagues have more or less said the same thing. Are you going to follow suit or take a different path?
I'm not going to agree with them, because none of them have actually pointed out what is pivotal to Green Party politics, which is we are member-led. And we've had very recent failed historical attempts at progressive alliances in 2017 and Unite to Remain in 2019. And these upset local parties up and down the country, Green parties, local parties. And one of the main problems with progressive alliances, not only are you getting into bed, so to speak, with people who aren't really aligned with you, for all kinds of reasons on the left-right political spectrum, but also you aren't giving Green voters a choice in those constituencies. And moreover, you're actually making deals behind the scenes, because that secrecy which Martin talks about also happens in our party, and we need to be transparent. So number one, as leader, it is not my decision or my choice. It is the membership who decide. And that debate needs to happen soon, particularly if we've got a general election coming around the corner. Secondly, Greens are impactful, and we need to have much more confidence in our own arguments and in our own politics. Bring that confidence to the ballot box and outside the ballot box and win on our own terms. Yes, I know, fundamentally, the problem is with a disproportionate electoral system. Even if we'd had a proportional system in 2019, we would have had double-digit MPs in Parliament. In 2015, when I was also deputy leader serving alongside Emilia, we had for the first time 1 million votes plus across the country. So I do think there is an appetite, growing appetite, to vote Green. And so we're already punching above our weight, but let's have the confidence to say no to those who are also asking for progressive alliances.
Simon in Southampton, who asked the question, what's your view on what you've heard?
All sounds very good. This is sort of responses I would have liked, apart from, and please forgive me if I'm rude, your last guy there, what's his name?
Shara.
Sorry, say it again.
Shara Ali.
Shara Ali. Okay, Shara, let's hope that you don't win, because you've
That's
got
a good start,
Shara. You've got to be realistic, okay? You've got to be right. So we've got left wing, we've got right wing. We're like America in that respect. They only have two choices. We have right wing, or we have lots of left wing, and it splits the vote. And your primary objective at the moment should be to get into power. And if you come into power in a coalition, then you can do so much. If you keep spitting your dummy out and putting your lip out and stamping your foot, you're not going to get anywhere. That's not the attitude to have. You need to get in.
Okay, let Shara just respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, just a quick one. We talk about reality. In fact, my campaign slogan is reality check. I'm simply saying that there is no other alternative than to vote Green to get what it is that you want, which is system change. And so we're lacking confidence if we're getting into bed, so to speak, with these other political parties. So I would say I'm the ultimate realist. I'm the realist about the fact that voters want to hear the truth. And we're failing in our responsibility if we don't tell the truth repeatedly and focus people's minds on the fact that time is running out. For some, time has already run out. It's a rapidly diminishing window of opportunity. And we've shown 2017, 2019 that progressive alliance policy isn't working.
Okay, Simon, thank you for your opening question. We've got lots of calls coming in, as you might imagine, but try and have your go as well. If you don't get through it first time, please try again. 0345 6060 973. It's 8:15.
This is LBC. This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
And it's our Green Party leadership debate. You can watch us on Global Player or the LBC YouTube, Facebook or Twitter feeds. Emily is our next caller. She's in Bath. Hello, Emily.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, what would you like to ask?
I wanted to know what the candidates thought it was about them sort of individually, about their backgrounds that makes them think that they're the most qualified to be the next leader.
That's always one of the most difficult questions, I think, for any candidate. Martin Hemingway, let's come to you first on that.
I'm not particularly used to talking about myself, but I'll try a bit. I've got lots of political experience. I've been politically active for over 50 years, initially in the Labour Party. I spent 12 years as a Labour Party councillor in Leeds, which is the second biggest local authority in the country. So I've got that political experience.
Is it? I thought Birmingham was.
They're the biggest. We're the second biggest.
Oh, well, okay. All right.
Oh, London doesn't count.
If you say so. You've just lost the votes of every Green Party member in London by saying that, but there we go.
Well, as long as I get the rest, I'm okay. But yeah, so I spent 12 years as a councillor there. A lot of it was on green issues. I persuaded Leeds Labour group not to incinerate or allow their waste to go for incineration, and a range of other issues. I spent 4 years as the chair of UK nuclear-free local authorities. That involved a speaking tour of Japan, speaking various places all over the country. I've done a lot of hustings, a lot of media work. I joined the Green Party about 18 years ago, because I couldn't defend what Labour was doing at that time. PFI was the largest issue that came between us, as it were, at that time. And since then, I've been Euro candidate twice. I was the lead candidate in 2009, general election candidate 5 times.
But what is it uniquely about you that makes you fit this position in a way that the others don't, do you think?
I'm very intelligent, very well read. I'm very good at responding on issues. I know the party very well indeed. I spent 4 years on our regional council, and I spent 6 years now on the Standing Orders Committee nationally, which answers all the queries about what should be happening within the party and so on, as well as organising conference. It also means I've met a lot of people within the party, and that's very important as a leader. And what we want to see are leaders who are going out to the country, out to the local parties, out to the regional parties, and working with them on the election campaigns that they're running and the other campaigns that they're running. And my candidate, Tina Rothery, is an anti-fracking campaigner, a very well-known one. And so between us, we combine a set of skills that offer a great deal to the party.
They may offer a great deal to the party, but I would have thought if you're going to get out there and win votes, what you've got to be is brilliant on the media. And what experience do you have of that?
Well, the first word I said on television after the introductions was goose pimples, and that was my first appearance on University Challenge. So that was some time ago.
Well, that should win you the election.
Yeah,
Ashley Gunn. No, let's move on. Let's go to Ashley Gunstock. So Emily is asking, what is it from your background that makes you think you're qualified to be leader of the party?
Well, my acting background is very useful in that
you can tell lies quickly.
Sorry?
You can tell lies very well then if you...
No, I tell the truth on stage and in front of the camera. It's the truth of the character. So I feel that I have the bearing and the media experience in terms of how to present myself to the media. But it's also the fact that I'm prepared to put in the hard yards as well. And Martin alluded to it about going to the areas outside of London. And that's one of the things that I do as an actor anyway. I tour, and the last tour I did, I took the time to go around the regions and visit the local people. And what I would do as leader, I would go to the local media stations and speak to them as well about our profile.
You got yourself into a right old pickle this week, though, didn't you? When you said that you can appeal to white middle-aged men better than the other candidates?
I felt that at the time, and wrongly, and I've apologised for this, that it seemed to me that the main way of getting into the forefront was to be a white middle-class male. However, on reflection, I felt that I was doing a disservice to some brilliant people within our party, and I retracted that and apologised for it.
But you said it in the first place, and that would indicate to me that you haven't got the experience to be leader of a party when you come out with something so patently ridiculous.
Well, the fact that I've apologised means that I am of good leadership material, because I realise when I'm wrong and I'm prepared to admit it and apologise, and that is a good leadership quality. And it's actually come from people who I initially offended, who told me that is the way a leader should behave.
Okay. Amelia Womack.
I feel like I'm quite an accidental politician in many ways. I've been really inspired about about the environment, about the natural world, and studied environmental biology and went on to study environmental technology as well. I worked in sustainability and realised that we could do all of this work in sustainability and trying to readdress many of the problems we have on economic inequalities as well as ecological ones. But really, what needs to happen is that the policies need to be put in place that creates the framework that we all act in. Nobody wants to be thinking about the environment every moment of the day. They simply want the environmental option to be the cheapest and easiest option. And so I have been deputy leader for the last 7 years, built on that strong background, as well as a campaigning background, which a campaigning background is what Tamsin brings as well with their work as an environmental leader. And that 7 years has seen me across the country working with local parties to get more Greens elected, because it is really by getting Greens elected that we can change things. I've been in the media. I've been on nearly every news channel. I've taken on Piers Morgan and Andrew Neil, and I've even made them both laugh, which I'm very proud of. And I think that I keep saying that this is a really important time. And this is a really important time in our history as a party, but it's a really important time in our history as well. And with COP coming up and the IPCC report, it is vital that we hold this government to account using a scientific background that proves that they're not going far enough, they're not doing enough, and to hold them to their promises.
Some would say you've been deputy leader for 7 years. The Greens, frankly, haven't made a huge amount of progress in those 7 years. You've still only got one MP. Yes, you have got some more councillors, but, I mean, in critical mass terms, not that many. You have to take some responsibility for that.
We've been growing, though, and I think that's what's powerful. And we have doubled our councillors. We've seen us achieve 1.1 million votes. We've seen us gaining ground in those years. The biggest time for the Green Party, the most councillors, the most new members, the most votes have all been under my deputy leadership. A lot of that is about how you build process and you support from the grassroots. A lot of that is about things like Target to Win. But to be honest, it's those hardworking councillors in communities as well. And the more Greens we get elected, the more we will get elected, because Greens inspire wherever they go.
Shara.
Well, before I come on to Emily's question around the background, I would say that part of why I'm in green politics is nothing to do with my background. It's to do with the fact that I'm a human being. And I care deeply about what happens to future generations, what happens to people who don't know where their next meal is going to come from in this country, or 24,000 people dying of malnutrition and preventable disease around the world. So I think everybody's a human being, and we have that in common. And that's what I want to appeal to as a Green leader. In terms of the background then, educationally, I've done a degree in biochemical engineering, and I worked in the field for a while. And then I became very concerned and preoccupied about how technology was pressing ahead without the ethics alongside it, and that moved me into philosophy. But what this brings me as leader of the Green Party and as an activist and a campaigner, I think, is a robust sense of reality. We need more reality in politics, not less, whether or not we're scientific in the way that we assess things, like the precautionary principle, or the fact that there's a climate emergency, or also in the way that we debate. And I do think that debate is particularly in short supply in politics across the country in every political party, and ours is not immune from that. And I think what I want to bring as leader is to debate with people who don't agree with me. And that includes going on media channels that, frankly, we're not allowed to speak on at the minute. I mean, it's often said as a high...
what?
Well, GB News, for example, or RT UK even. It's often said, and I know that...
You'd go on RT. I find that astonishing.
I've been on RT, and the thing is that there is no such thing as an unbiased media. My point is this.
You're right, but there are propaganda channels, and that's what that is.
That may be so, but there is no such thing as a channel without those vested interests either. My point is that in an increasingly diversified social media, people are smart enough to sift through whatever it is they want to listen to or watch and work out for themselves. They're intelligent. When I've been on RT UK or even on other shows, I've not been censored, and I've not, you have to take a judgment on a case-by-case basis. My point is this. We need to be increasingly speaking to people who don't just agree with us. That's the point of politics, is to convince people who don't agree with you, not just speak to those people who do agree with you. And I think that we need to reach beyond our comfort zone, whether it's on women's rights. Many women have joined the party in order to vote for me because they are politically homeless. And that says something about the political culture.
Come on to that issue a little bit later. Adrian Ramsey.
Well, I agree with the point that we need to reach out beyond the core Green support to the wider public, and Carla Denyer and myself are the candidates with the track record of doing that. We both have a long history of representing the party and, importantly, of taking that message successfully to the wider public. We're unique in this election in having experience as elected Greens, and in both our cases have been instrumental in building up substantial Green support in our cities, both of which are outside the London and South East part of the country. We're strong in the regions. So in my case, for example, I led the unprecedented growth and success of the local party in Norwich, where we rose to 15 seats and the largest local councillor group in the country when I was leading the group here. And in Bristol, Carla's one of 24 Green councillors, the joint largest party on the local council. So we've got that actual experience of taking the message, winning elections, and then representing residents on those full range of issues, whether it's housing and local services or whether it's delivering practical Green policies. And then what I'd add to that is that we've got the experience outside the party as well. So Carla's practical experience as a wind farm engineer, myself in my time since I was in the Green Party leadership previously, I've been chief executive of 2 national environmental charities of a similar size to the Green Party. So we understand what it takes to lead and deliver change and success in an organisation. And of course, having been deputy leader, I've got substantial experience in the mainstream media as well, taking on ferocious journalists like Andrew Neil and, of course, Iain Dale.
That's just crawling, Adrian. It'll get you nowhere. Emily, what's your response to what you've heard?
Well, there were some things in there that definitely were what I wanted to hear. My main problem, well, what I think the leader needs to do is I think there's quite a few people out there like my dad who agree with Green policies. I talk to him about stuff that we're doing and he agrees with it all and thinks it's good. But he lives in Portishead, which is Conservative, and he always votes Conservative because I don't think he's got confidence in the Green Party's leaders in the environmental movement. And I think there's other people who join Extinction Rebellion and Greenpeace and other charities but aren't coming on board as Greens and voting Green. And I think there's something there that I think the next leadership team really need to address if we're going to get more MPs.
Yeah. Okay, Emily, thank you very much indeed for phoning in with your question. We'll come to more of your questions in a moment. It's 8:32 on LBC. Serena Farrow has the news headlines.
Child sexual abuse has been found to be widespread among many UK religious groups, with a major report accusing them of blatant hypocrisy. An independent inquiry says shocking failures to protect children were identified in its analysis of 38 organisations across England and Wales. NBC says at least 22 people have now been killed, including a toddler, after Storm Ida hit America. Record rainfall led to mass floods in New York and New Jersey, where subway stations were engulfed by water. And the Foreign Secretary says it looks like Afghanistan's Kabul airport will be able to reopen in the near future. Dominic Raab's been holding talks in the region to ensure the Taliban allows safe passage for people who want to leave the country. LBC weather. Fine day for many, staying dry for most parts of the UK overnight. Clear in the west as well, a low of 8 degrees.
This is LBC. Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
It's the Green Party leadership debate on LBC between now and 9:15. You're phoning in your droves, 0345 6060 973. We have with us Amelia Womack, Shara Ali, Ashley Gunstock, Adrian Ramsey and Martin Hemingway. They are the 5 candidates or the representatives of the 5 leadership teams. Why is it that some of you are standing jointly with somebody else and the others are standing individually? I don't know who I'm going to... Well, you are the current deputy leader, Amelia,
yes.
So let me ask you that question. Why this slightly weird system?
Well, because co-leadership is to practice different models. So, I mean, we've seen in government at the moment the failure when a leader is on holiday or a leader is sick, that there is nobody there to take their place. And co-leadership creates a different way of working where we're able to create a work-life balance and make it more accessible to those who might have childcare responsibilities or other things in their life that mean that they aren't able to give a full-time role to this.
So, Shara, if you win... You haven't got a running mate. What do you do
Yeah, well,
then?
it's not quite like that, because whatever the permutation, whether you have a co-leader or a leader, you'll either get 1 or 2 deputy leaders to compensate. So you'll have 3 in the leadership team. And I would say that whether you are a leader or a co-leader, you'll be working, hand in glove.
Do you appoint those people then
No.
yourself?
Normally they'd all be elected at the same time. In fact, we had an election last year for all, 2 strands of the contest. What's happened because of a leadership by-election is we're only electing for 1 at the moment. I suspect that if we did elect 1 particular candidate would have to have a deputy leader by-election after that.
Exciting. Another opportunity for a hustings on LBC, no doubt. Right, let's go to our next question. It's Abigail in Dewsbury. Abigail, hi, what would you like to ask?
Hi, Dr. Basically, I'm not a member of any party, but my worry is that progressive, like left-leaning parties are actually getting very gender critical and almost like really acting to trans people. I'm not trans, I'm a trans ally, and I'm very disappointed to see that Sean Berry stepped down, because she was a big defender of trans people. I'm quite interested because Shara Halley is apparently all on the internet. All the gender critical people are like joining Green Party because they know your stance on that. So really, how can you stand and be quite exclusive to trans people with views of very gender critical? I know that Amelia Womack is a big thing. She's a feminist, and you believe that trans is your thing, which is great because I'm a feminist and I think trans women are women too. But I don't understand why gender critical people, and it's not just Green Party, it's Labour, other left-leaning parties, are really taking a grip. It's like we're going backwards, not forwards.
Okay,
and I find
all right, Abigail, we've got your question. Thank you very much for it. It does seem as though, Sean Berry stood down because, Shara, you were appointed to your position and you don't take the same views on these issues that she does. So inevitably, this whole leadership contest seems to have, just from social media, been dominated by this issue. So I'm going to come to you first on this. How do you answer Abigail's point? Are you transphobic?
No, I'm not transphobic. In fact, I am a friend of trans people. And I think it's very important, and there's a flip side to the characterisation which Abigail put, which is that women are feeling that political parties are hostile to their needs, interests and concerns, particularly around provision of same or single-sex services. And why is that? Because even a recent law court ruling on prisons made out that there is a conflict of sorts between the provision for transgender inmates and women, females in prisons. So that's the court of law saying that there is a potential conflict. So
Shara,
we need to negotiate, and we can't negotiate
Shara,
those
I
spaces.
think you can't just narrow down the argument to these points. If we want to campaign
finish?
on women's rights, can we take
Amelia,
on the austerity agenda that has
you'll
made
have
it
your
not
turn
accessible?
in a moment.
Let me finish. So, first of all, I'm as trans inclusive as they come, as is my party, and I'm proud of that. What we mustn't get into the
perception
business
is that you're not, and perception, as you know, is important.
There may be a perception, but even in Abigail, if I may directly address a comment of hers, that trans women are women, that needs to be qualified. That doesn't mean that trans women aren't women, but it's a statement of gender identity. And it's no good in politics just parroting slogans without looking at the actual statement and the meaning. Because women are also women, trans women are also trans women. And what we mustn't do is eradicate sex as a data collection. ONS as well had to put out in the Census 21 a revised guidance to make sure that people didn't mischaracterize their sex. Because guess what? And I have colleagues, because I work in medical profession, medical school, I have colleagues also who understand the importance of collecting sex characteristics in order to treat transgender patients.
Amelia.
So these two
rights
are not
you
mutually exclusive.
dodged the issue there. Do you believe that trans women are women, yes or no?
As a statement of gender identity. But that's precisely the problem, because if you state it baldly without any qualification whatsoever, that might make it sound like it's a statement of sex, but it isn't, because a transgender woman still will retain their sex, which is male. So let's not conflate sex and gender.
But that's the issue where, Amelia, you explain what the issue is, because you would not agree with that, would you? That you wouldn't caveat it in the same way that Shara has.
So I talk a lot about intersexual feminism, and I think it's really important that we are talking about how we come together to tackle the biggest issues of our time. We won't do that by dividing society. We won't do that by creating these divisive arguments that harm the most marginalised people in our communities. If you want to fight for feminism, fight for better investment into rape crisis centres, fight for genuine investment into domestic violence centres. At the moment, there's in some places a 9 months to 18 month 12-month waiting list for all women who have experienced abuse. How many of those women are still surviving their abuse after they haven't had the counselling that they deserve? Women's prisons are terrible places. They are violent places. We should be challenging the very premise of how prisons work in this country. If you want to care about sex and gender, fight for all women, because those intersections are important. So, whether it's a black woman, a disabled woman, a Roma woman, making sure that we are fighting as women, as a whole, it's important. You cannot divide.
There are three other candidates waiting to get in.
Because we don't have enough of this debate in our own party. So you've mentioned...
You've been debating nothing else for the last few weeks.
But we don't have this debate.
Shara, this is not a debate. This is about people's rights. This is about people's fundamental rights to exist. If you're going to call it a debate, you are ignoring their rights.
What about the right of a woman in a rape crisis shelter in Scotland, for example?
So have you worked with...
No, let him make his point.
But I feel like, as a woman...
Amelia, I'm sorry.
Iain, sorry. As a woman on this panel, as the only woman on this panel who has accessed services for things like for domestic violence,
I want to hear the point that he was going to make.
The point, but I feel like that as someone who has accessed these systems, then I should have more of a say on what it's like to access them.
There are 5 people.
Let's just give a couple of examples, right? We have a refuge in Brighton. Rise, yes, which has been defunded because they weren't deemed to be sufficiently gender neutral. And that's women who have been deprived of an important service. We have an MSP last year, Andy Whiteman, just check him out, right? He had to resign from the Scottish Parliament because he felt unable to vote according to his conscience for an amendment which simply would have said this, that a woman who has suffered from rape, for example, has the right to request that their examiner should be of the same sex. Now, I regard that as a matter of basic human dignity, and I would like to hear from Amelia whether she agrees with me.
I'm sorry, I just don't think that bringing in these kind of points is helpful in the argument.
It's real life. Sorry, it's a fair point to ask. Should he have been forced to resign over that?
He wasn't forced to resign. He chose to resign, and I think that's a difference.
More important, how would you have voted for that amendment? I would have voted for that amendment. It's not transphobic to vote for an amendment which allows a woman to request that she be examined by somebody of the same sex.
Bring in the
would you have voted for that amendment?
Let's bring in the others. I think Amelia probably will say she wouldn't have voted for that amendment. But let's go to Ashley.
Yeah, this is a very, very difficult issue, and I find that it's a generational thing. I understand the need to break down barriers. I understand about people wanting their identities. I would, as leader, I need more information because, unfortunately, it is a generational thing. And without even wishing to, because I misgendered someone, I got myself in a little bit of hot water.
Again?
Yes, again. I'm fallible. We all make mistakes.
You need more information. What more information can you need? It's all out there.
No, I mean, when I say more information, all right, let me give you an example. I worked... It's very, very difficult. It's a generational thing. I don't think this is going to happen in our lifetime, or my lifetime, because I'm getting on a bit now. But I remember I worked in a pupil referral unit, and there was a pupil there who was having difficulties, and it turned out that pupil was having problems with gender identity, and the next time I saw that pupil, they had jumped off a bridge and tried to commit suicide, and they were in a plaster cast in a schoolroom in a hospital that I was also teaching at. And yet that person was so much happier understanding that there were people who were recognising the identity that they wanted, and so therefore it's not you can't just blanket and say all people who are trans women are women and all people who are trans men are men. It is a very, very delicate situation, and it's generational because this generation is pushing the boundaries, and rightly so, and stamping their authority on society, and I understand that.
I'm going to come to Adrian and Martin after the break. It's 8:48.
This is LBC. Iain Dale on LBC.
It's 8:51 on LBC. I could spend the rest of the programme reading out the tweets that you're sending on this debate, but I'm not sure they'd pass Ofcom, to be honest. Right, let's go to our other two candidates on this issue of trans rights. Martin Hemingway, what's your view on Abigail's question?
On Abigail's question, which I'll come to in just a second, what we have to recognise, first of all, that we're in a climate emergency. We've got COP26 coming up.
I'm sorry.
And,
I'm sorry.
hold on,
That's got
let me
nothing
get
to
to my
do
next
with this
sentence.
question. No, get on to answer Abigail's question,
Let me get to the
if you
next
would.
sentence. The next sentence is, we're being distracted from what people see as the core purpose of the Green Party by this debate. I shouldn't think there is anyone in the Green Party who would say that trans people do not exist, do not have a right to define their identity.
Sean Berry resigned over this issue, so you can't say that it's not a subject that we should discuss.
I'm not saying that. I haven't said that. You're making that up.
That was your implication.
What I'm saying is that it is causing a great deal of difficulty in the party, disjuncture, breaches of unity within the party. And what we need to do as a party is to find a way forward that resolves those difficulties so we can concentrate on the overarching issue, which is the one I started with. So we do need to deal with it because we've got more important things on the table. Shah has used the phrase, I think, about the candidates sitting on the fence. And that implies that there are only two sides. What we need is to find a way forward between those two sides. And recognising that there are points that need to be discussed. There is that definition within our party policy that was referred to by Abigail at the beginning. But as has already been said, that definition has implications. It's not a simple statement by itself. It has implications that need to be explored about what it actually means for women and for trans women, for men and for trans men. And what we're proposing, Tina and I, is that we need to be working within the party. And what we're suggesting is a members' assembly on the model of a citizens' assembly to get a random sample of party members. Yes, some might be already in the debate, others not, others completely not.
Sorry,
but then listen to the issues.
Martin, as a leader, you're supposed to lead the debate, not follow it. We're waiting to hear what your ideas are.
I'm telling you what my idea is, which is that we should have that. And I do disagree with your description of what a leader is. We aren't the other parties, and we have a model that has been described as servant leadership.
The clue is in the word leader. You don't see yourself as a leader, yet you're standing for the leadership. That's odd.
What I'm saying, I'm standing for leader because I think we need to be leading the party on the way forward. A leader does not tell other people what to think. They work with other people. But a leader gives a lead and actually gives their own views on the subject. And fine, put it to a Green Citizens Assembly, but that Green Citizens Assembly might like to know what the leader of the party thinks it should decide. I don't think they should know that at all, because that's not how the Citizens Assembly operates.
All right.
The Citizens Assembly operates and tells. We've had it very successfully in Leeds with a Climate Citizens Assembly that was given that information and then fed back to the council. But the council didn't start off telling the people what to think. It allowed them to make their own minds up.
All right, let's go to Adrian. Let's go to Adrian Ramsey.
So I want to make Carla's position and my position on this clear in terms of how we support inclusivity, and also address the issue of how we go about having this discussion, because I think leaders do have a role to play in setting a right tone where people can feel included and where everyone feels welcomed in the Green Party. In terms of our position, the Green Party has a proud history of supporting equal rights in terms of feminism, in terms of lesbian, gay and bisexual equality, and that has to extend to trans rights. We agree with the party's policy on trans inclusion, and everyone needs to feel at home and welcome in the Green Party and safe to discuss their opinions and to be part of what the party does. Equally, though, I think it's just as important we think about how we go about having these discussions in the Green Party. And as Abigail suggested, the nature of this discussion is reflected in progressive parties throughout the UK and lots of our public institutions. And I think what we're seeing is, you could call it a culture war, which is something that deeply concerns me, especially if it's one where people end up feeling like their identity is being questioned or like they're not able to express themselves. And equally, we need to find a way in the Green Party and other bodies of having this discussion with respect and with understanding and with kindness. And so our proposal from Carla and myself is that we set up an approach where we support our liberation groups and our organisations within the party to have a discussion that enables people to understand each other, to understand party policy and our shared mission. But because my experience is that if people engage at a human level, then they can understand each other. We can create a space where people can and do make genuine
Adrian, this is again, it's the same as Martin. This is motherhood and apple pie stuff. Why can't we all just get along? Which I suppose I shouldn't use, as that's the title of my book. But I mean, it is flowery language which no one is going to disagree with. But we want to know what you and Carla think. Are you with Amelia or are you with Shara?
No, I said that in the first part of my answer, and I was very clear. We support the party's policies on trans rights, and we have a track record of doing that, whether that's speaking at Pride's marches, whether that's advocating for trans-inclusive policies, as Carla's done in her role as a councillor. So our position on the policy is clear. What I'm saying alongside that is that we have to foster a discussion in a way that helps people to understand each other, and that fosters a tone of respect and kindness in the discussion. And this is something not just for the Green Party, as Abigail says, all organisations in society are addressing how we can ensure we have an inclusive and welcoming approach where we respect people's lived experience, and all organisations need to rise to that.
Let me read a tweet out from Morel, who says, Amelia doesn't speak for every woman. She speaks for a loud minority. She needs to speak to women on the street out of her middle-class university circle and ask what they think about it. Her attitude puts women in danger. Trans rights does not trump women's rights. Amelia.
This is why we need to be working as women together.
And if you could speak outside your university circle, I'd be really grateful.
I mean, I do speak outside my university circle, and I speak to people who work in rape crisis centres, and I speak to people who work in domestic violence centres, and they've been working for decades on how to make safe spaces for women, including trans women. It's not until recent times that we've been using this as a way to divide people, and this is why we need to ensure that we are stepping up above those divisions and ensuring that we're challenging the reason that they've been created, and that is an austerity agenda that has cut the very services that people need to access. It is a point where we are creating divisions instead of working together to tackle some of the biggest problems of our time, including, as Martin said, the climate and ecological emergency.
We've got 45 seconds to go before the news. Shara, we've spent 25 minutes talking about this. I wouldn't have normally done that on this subject, but given that it has dominated the discussion, final word to you on it.
Well, I think it's the most important thing here is that you can't tease out even possible misunderstandings unless you have a debate. And that's why what I want to put front and centre, not just of my campaign, but going out to the country, is that we need to be able to debate maturely on these matters, because you can't otherwise settle disagreement otherwise.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Well, we've got 15 more minutes with our candidates. Time, I hope, for two more questions. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to or watching LBC. It's 9 o'clock.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, a toddler is believed to be among more than 24 people who've been killed by Storm Ida in America. New York, New Jersey and Pennsylvania were all hit with devastating rainfall and heavy winds. Cars and subway stations were immersed in floodwater. The President, Joe Biden, says it's a sign of things to come.
The past few days of Hurricane Ida and the wildfires in the West and the unprecedented flash floods in New York and New Jersey is yet another reminder that these extreme storms and the climate crisis are here. We need to be much better prepared.
Child sexual abuse has been found to be widespread among many UK religious groups, with a major report accusing them of blatant hypocrisy. An independent inquiry says shocking failures to protect children were identified in analysis of 38 organisations across England and Wales. Elsewhere, Education Secretary Gavin Williamson says he'll move heaven and earth to keep children in lessons as schools return after the summer. Figures show around half of 16 and 17-year-olds in England have had their first dose of a coronavirus vaccine. It rises to 2/3 in Wales. WhatsApp's been handed a record fine of more than £193 million by the data privacy watchdog in Ireland. And investigations found the messaging app breached EU laws on transparency, as well as around sharing of other users' information with other Facebook-owned companies. Is going to appeal, calling the penalty entirely disproportionate. And ABBA have announced their first studio album for 40 years. ABBA Voyage will be released in November before a set of concerts where virtual avatars will play hits such as Mamma Mia and Waterloo. LBC Markets report the FTSE 100 closed trading up 14 points at 71.64. The pound buys $1.38 and €1.16. LBC weather fine and dry evening for many, particularly cloudy though in western parts, a low of 8 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Serena Farrow.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Very good evening. It's 2 minutes past 9. We're in the middle of our Green leadership debate with the candidates Amelia Womack on my left. We have Shara Ali on my immediate left. We have Ashley Gunstock on my right. Adrian Ramsey and Martin Hemingway joining us via the wonders of Zoom. Next question from Chris in Richmond. Hi, Chris.
Hi, panel, and hi, candidates. Will any of you have the courage to condemn the criminal damage to property and phenomenal waste of police time and resources caused by Extinction Rebellion protests in London over the last few days?
Let's go to Ashley first.
Well, first of all, I have to say that I actually...
And just before we continue, I would ask you all to keep your answers quite short on this, because then we'll have time for another question. Apologies.
Okay, no worries. I have to say that I support the principal aims of XR, as I should do, being an environmentalist. However, I do find that a lot of what they do ranges from the sublime to the ridiculous. And for instance, taking hold of the British Museum and the Science Museum were superb acts as far as I'm concerned. But then standing on a train in Canning Town and then spray painting buildings with chemicals, which are going to need chemicals to remove them, seems to me absolutely ridiculous and folly. So I think that Extinction Rebellion needs to get a grip.
Adrian Ramsey.
So look, Extinction Rebellion and the Green Party are different organisations with different roles, and I don't always agree with every tactic of XR. But the big picture point here is that Extinction Rebellion has done a hugely important job alongside the climate strikers, Greta Thunberg and David Attenborough, in raising climate right up the agenda. We wouldn't be having the opinion polls that we have today of climate change being right at the top of people's list of concerns alongside the economy and health and all the other big issues. And if we hadn't seen that action to push it right up the agenda. And what our role is as a political party is to come in and say, we need to deliver the system changes right across the policy suite if we're going to achieve the major changes that are needed in society to address the climate emergency and create a fairer society at the same time. So our role is taking that message to the wider public and showing the practical policies that are needed to deliver those concerns that XR activists are rightly drawing attention to.
Martin Hemingway.
It's what we would expect to be occurring in a lot of similar cases. Suffragists broke windows. They took part in acts of criminal damage. And combined with historical circumstances, combined with work in Parliament, in institutions, change took place. So what I'm, in relation to what your question posed, I'm happy and proud to praise XR for the work that they do. But Adrian's right. They're working in a different way from us. They're drawing attention to the anger, to the worry, to the fear that the climate emergency has generated in a large part of the population, running right through the age range.
Do you not think, though,
we are here as a political wing to work with them on that.
Do you not think that a lot of their actions initially, I think a lot of the public thought this is a different way of protesting, good on them, but some of the things that they've been doing recently, like I think in this latest round of protests in the last couple of weeks, they kind of took over the offices of the World Wildlife Federation, and you sit and scratch your head and think, how does that get a single person supporting the cause?
They have made mistakes. Ashley's already referred to mistakes they made. They will make mistakes. They'll make more mistakes. But the emphasis ought to be on the message that they're trying to get across, not on those small mistakes they make along the way.
Okay.
That's what we've got to concentrate on, because that's the important thing.
Shara Ali.
Now, I was at the launch of the latest series of demonstrations in Guildhall just over a week ago.
Canvassing for votes.
Yeah, no, and I was also a founding signatory of Extinction Rebellion in 2018, so I do support their main aims. And I think it's important to understand that the Green Party also believes in the necessity, because we're dealing with a scientific necessity, we need to change politics, we need to change the framework in which we operate. We do believe and understand the importance of social transformation. So whilst I would not necessarily condemn outright every particular action that they take, I understand why they're doing it. And that's the whole point of non-violent direct action, to break the law in order to draw attention to a wider cause. I think where Extinction Rebellion needs to think more deeply is how to win friends and influence people. Canning Town's been given an example. There should almost be an automatic qualification to non-violent direct action, which it needs to be intelligent non-violent direct action. And I think what we do risk is, for example, vandalising the offices of the Green Party, which happened a couple of years ago. I do regard that as fairly contradictory thing.
Extinction Rebellion genuinely did that?
No, an extreme wing of Extinction Rebellion. But the point is, it's within the ambit of non-violent direct action. And I would say, just to think of what is probably more worth condemning is the reasons why people felt the necessity to do this, whether it's an unjust economic system or the fact that we have got people dying as we speak of rising sea levels in the Maldives or Bangladesh. We've got glacier treat like there's no tomorrow. So what they are trying to get us to focus on is the fact we cannot just carry on business as usual. And in that regard, I do support their tactics, although not in every case.
Okay, Amelia.
So if people want Extinction Rebellion not to be on the streets, then we can have Green Party. If you vote for the Green Party, we'll be putting the policies in place that mean that people don't need to be going out and demonstrating to sound the alarm on the climate and ecological emergency, because we will have people there using their elected power to make sure we're addressing these issues. And I think I agree with I don't agree with every tactic, but we've moved. Politics has moved since the existence of Extinction Rebellion in terms of our understanding of the climate and ecological
Have they achieved
emergency.
something that you as a Green Party haven't?
Well, we need to have more voters and we need to have more councillors. And so if people want to see, what Extinction Rebellion have done as well is really brought attention to the emergency, and the Greens have been a part of that as well. But what we need now is for everybody who wants climate action to be voting for the Green Party. This should be the logical next stage in our history. Okay. And it should also be, if you look at Labour when Keir Hardie was first elected and Merthyr Tydfil, no one would have thought that in 20 years' time Labour would be the second biggest party, and it's because they tackled the biggest challenges of their age. And I think this is why it's the time for the Greens, because with COP and the IPCC, we are honestly challenging the biggest issues of our age.
Okay, Chris and Richmond, your reaction?
Lily-livered responses. Roger Hallam 2 years ago was arrested for putting drones around Heathrow Airport. How far is the Green Party prepared to go? The civilian airliner down to Heathrow just to get what you want? It's not appropriate. And Amelia's response, you have to vote Green to get rid of Extinction Rebellion. No, thank you very much. It's just outrageous. Well, would you like it if someone threw a stone through your window tonight? And you wouldn't, would you? So it's okay, but it's okay to damage buildings and other public property at the taxpayers' expense. You're pathetic, the lot of you.
And I'm sure Chris won't mind me saying that he is a Liberal Democrat, so he may not come across it in this.
Oh, really?
He is indeed. Sure. Chris, thank you very much indeed. Right, final question. Again, shortish answers if you can. Stephen is in Chipping Norton. Hello, Stephen.
I'm just outside you there. I'm a small farmer. I farm about 250 acres. I'd like to know why the Green Party and other green organisations keep blaming livestock for being the biggest problem for the environment, when in fact, Iain, it's a use and production of chemical fertilisers on the ground, which causes far more damage to the environment. I know it's a very metropolitan group you've got there. They don't sound like there's any farmers there or people who actually work on the land.
Well, there's a farmer chairing the debate.
From them for a change, because I get no subsidies at all because I own very little land. The subsidies actually go to the landowners, not the people that farm it. But could they answer that question, please? People keep saying, we've got to eat pulses and stop keeping sheep and cattle, when the truth is chemical fertiliser causes a lot more damage than livestock, and that's a fact.
Okay. All right, Stephen, I just want to reassure you there's a farmer chairing the panel tonight, so I'm going to make sure I get good answers for you. Shara, let's start with you.
Well, firstly, I mentioned that I used to work as a biotechnologist, and one of the reasons I moved away from that was I was absolutely appalled that we were actually producing pharmaceuticals like bovine somatotropin for farmers in this country. Fortunately, they didn't get a product license in the EU, so I regard that as a precautionary approach. The real question here is reducing livestock, which is responsible for methane gases, is a known...
Is it more responsible than chemical fertilisers for environmental
What we
issues?
have to do, and I understand the difficulty of this, because people are wedded to a system and they can't change and fix all of it at the same time. But what we have to do is approach a model where everybody is pulling their weight. And I don't doubt the difficulty that there is for farmers just keeping afloat. That is incredibly hard. And why should they trust a green even? Because I think one of the other themes coming through this is that we must reach beyond our comfort zone. I actually enjoy hearing listeners berate us, because they're the people we need to convince, not just talking within our own bubble. We need to raise our game, improve our arguments, and convince that farmer why it's in his interest ultimately, because there's nothing worse than universal death. That's the ultimate problem here.
Just looking at the time here, I'm going to ask everybody to speak for maximum 45 seconds on this, and then we'll give you 45 seconds for closing statements. Adrian.
Well, the truth is that how we manage the land and how we produce food is crucial to addressing climate emissions and to encouraging sustainable food production and supporting biodiversity. And both the issues that Steve raises are important. We need to see a massive reduction in uses of chemical fertilizers, and we need to have a transition to different types of farming, whether that's agroecology, whether it's more localized forms of farming, and a reduction in meat and dairy production. The truth is that livestock farming is massively environmentally it's a massive environmental issue in terms of land, in terms of water, and in terms of methane and carbon emissions. And we need to support farmers through looking at where the subsidies go to look at those environmentally friendly forms of farming.
Martin?
The contribution of livestock to global emissions is large. Agriculture is about 12.5% of global emissions, and livestock produce about 80% of those global emissions. It's not carbon dioxide, it's the shorter-lived ones, methane and nitrogen oxide. And nitrogen oxide does come, as the question indicated, in part from chemical fertilizers and the changes to them. But we have to face up to the fact that livestock's a major producer. Whether this country is the major problem is then a different issue. So someone like India, which has a large cattle population that just lives on and is not particularly used, is a bigger contributor to methane. And we need to recognise the value of pasture and grassland sequestration of carbon. So there are various elements to the debate. But I think what's also important is that we do address the issue of subsidy and the importance of ensuring that subsidy goes to the person who needs it, the farmer on the land, and not the person who owns the land, and particularly the big landowners who get most.
Amelia?
I mean, frankly, the system is broken, and I think that the farmers, I'm not a farmer, but the farmers that I speak to feel that they are being deprioritised in many issues. And lots of farmers, I think it's really important that we're talking to farmers and the Farmers Union about how we readdress broken models to ensure that we're tackling the climate emergency together, because farmers really are the custodians of the environment and in many cases are on the front lines of the environmental crisis. And the concerns that you have are often the concerns that we have too. And I think that all of that work in terms of how we talk about reducing pollution, but also maybe challenging the systems that mean we're creating increased land use through livestock production, that we can be working together on some of those solutions, because I know that all the farmers I've spoken to are passionate about change to ensure that we have that protection.
Okay, Ashley?
Yeah, I believe that there is a need for a transition from meat and dairy to a more vegetarian-based diet. And I may be speaking as someone from London, but it's a fact that besides the chemicals that are being used, and we need to find ways in which we can grow vegetable products less intensely and without these fertilizers, because as far as I can see, a cow or a few cows standing in a field to be fed when that field could feed probably 10 times as many people seems to me the wrong kind of economics as well.
Not sure that Stephen's going to be on your side on that one. Stephen, I'm not going to come back to you because we really have run out of time, but I'm going to give each of you 30 seconds, 3-4 sentences maximum, to make your final pitch to all the Green Party members who've been watching and listening to our debate tonight. I'm going to start off with Amelia.
So I keep saying this is an important part in our party's history. And with the track record that Tamsin and I have, we can genuinely deliver on making change for our party. We have a manifesto of how we get more Greens elected, because that is the only way that we will tackle the ecological emergency and the climate emergency while addressing inequality. We will oppose austerity budgets and make sure that we're speaking out for communities. We also have a liberation manifesto of how we will tackle the big issues within our party and outside to create genuine equality for everybody. And so based on our track record, we can make genuine change and we can make vibrant change.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Martin Hemingway.
As you probably know, we're from the north, one from Blackpool, one from Leeds. We're outside the southern centre of the party. To some extent, we're outside the establishment of the party. You've got 2-3 former deputy leaders on with you. What we want to do is to be working with the party, with those local regional parties that actually get people elected. We can't lay claim as leaders to getting elections won. It's the people out there on the streets, knocking on the doors, going from place to place that get people elected. And we're going to be there to support them.
Ashley Gunstock.
First thing we do, as I alluded to before, is get rid of this Tory government. We do need a progressive alliance to do that, so that we can get PR and UBI, as has also been mentioned. But we also need to be looking at the possibility of getting funding for the party. When you consider that the Liberal Democrats had 30 times more than we did and the Brexit had 15 at the last election, we should be looking towards socially and ecologically ethical companies to fund us. And we should be also looking out to other members of society. And I would say Conservatives with small c's is one pool that we could look for.
Okay, Shara Ali.
We need to reach beyond our comfort zone because, frankly, we are running out of time. I want to be the leader who's going to be bold, far bolder than we've ever been, actually, around the reality that we need to present and explain. We had a 7% reduction in carbon emissions last year due to the lockdown. Why weren't we using that as an opportunity? I know it was horrendous, the deadly pandemic and the way in which people were dying. But we also need to remind people that there were also learning points in that. We could have learned a better way to reset society for the sake of ourselves and future generations.
Adrian Ramsey.
Time is running out to address the climate and ecological emergency and create a fairer society. There's a huge need for more elected Greens across every corner of England and Wales, and there's a huge opportunity to make that happen. Greens are frequently polling third in the opinion polls, and we must seize this opportunity to take green policies, practical green policies, to the heart of the debate and win mainstream support. And Carla Denyer and I are the only candidates with the experience as elected Greens of winning that mainstream support who can take the Green Party to the next level.
Well, thank you to all five of you. It's been a very spirited debate. Amelia Womack, Shara Ali, Ashley Gunstock, Adrian Ramsey and Martin Hemingway. The final word's going to go to John in Islington. He says vegans and vegetarians are responsible for a huge amount of methane being emitted into the atmosphere. I'll just leave that one there. And the final tweet goes to Julie Bindle, who says, if the Greens ever stop wanging on, I will be on LBC talking to Iain Dale about my new book any minute now. And she will be. It's this, Feminism for Women. Thank you all very much indeed. It's 9:20.
This is LBC.